Ja, is ook.
On which one is this? Oh, Alex. Yeah, yeah.
The background is already interesting.
Yeah, nice. Oh,
Everything is set up for you.
okay, great.
It's live, so you can feel free to get started whenever you're comfortable.
Yeah.
All right.
So do we need to click something? It's live now.
Yeah, it's live technically. No one's on right
Okay.
now, so
Okay, but we don't need to do anything. It's
you don't have to touch anything. Okay, you're all set. All right, enjoy. See you in a bit.
Nee, no.
Oh, kijk. Dit is de
De reserves aangekomen.
Nee. Ja, daar woont. Maar zit hier nou ook een camera in? Worden we nou ook opgenomen?
Ja.
Is het ook digitaal?
Ja. Dat zijn
Ja. Dus
Jean Supé.
Dus thuis kan er ook nog naar ons gekeken worden. Gaan het in je
Ja, thuis kan het even.
We hebben het nog niet verteld, maar ik zou het niet een beetje weten. Dus... Nice. Yeah.
I am Romy. USA. Yes. We're in crisis. Yeah, we don't have. We have the college. We have that. There's very voice is bad. They don't have nothing. But it's not a method at all. Corruption.
Yeah, it seems to be a certain benefit there.
Yes. It's very hard to work. And then people don't want to have that.
Yeah, it makes it very open. That's right.
I meant, I can think of it.
Okay, we can double this.
Yes, that's, I'm very much. My students are. Space. East Africa, where we've done it.
Okay, so the three of them.
Has some yeah.
Yeah. You really
Water program and so water is.
Never seen
No, we work with
He's open to
Yes.
System
strengthening as we go on.
He is, yeah, we're looking for like, it's been Georgia, that's what finds it.
Not sure that this is very
Yeah, she told me. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll keep our hopes up. Make a little bit more effort because sometimes it's like people are too much on your wash face and sometimes it's too much on your finance. So you really need to or sometimes people have too much of like, you know, a donor, whereas we need them to also be able to think out of the box. Yeah, good idea. Oh, nee, we're talking about Joshua's. We're looking for his twin brother.
Zie je het zo niet?
No.
Je kent de reactie van ver in time. Is it best ever? You should hold experience. Sorry.
She's
If need be.
Great. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. That's not yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can do much more because it's very right now, unfortunately.
So we will start in a few minutes, give people a little chance to still come to our room. Let you know.
Ja, deze gewoon. Ja, dan ja, meer worst, maar wordt heel veel suggestie. We zijn heel veel deze van deze. Ook niet
Zijn we even een rondje gedaan?
Ja, je wordt ook in beeld zetten. Ja, als je trainers. Een van de deelnemers.
Yeah, we should have, we are not really well described.
Ja. Zou de echt weer naar de moeten zetten, wat er nog gehoord is. Als die overleden gedaan, maar best wel zo. Hadden die ook een goed en dan hadden ze in de rij gestaan. Niks met bedienen met geïnteresseerde mensen dan. Ik zou het Heel veel achterwerk. Bijna niet. Nee. Heel goed voorstel.
I carry that. You want to miss this? What? No, I gotta see. I was at the wrong end of the thing and I thought, I'm not gonna be any seats left.
It's what we expected from someone who's.
Well, once you have the right people in there, it doesn't happen.
Overview is on.
Right, exactly. The quality, right, exactly. Horrible that we will be expanding.
See if there's a lot of movement on the floor. Start.
I don't know if they run the bell yet, but.
Do they? Oh, I didn't know. I do the bells and it's.
What?
Our meetings today.
Yeah, but you.
Shall we start?
Hi, so.
How are you? All right. Yeah, we're going to start. All right, I want to welcome you all to our session. And in this session, we will be talking about about our results in the Finnish Mondial program. Financial innovation, inclusion for sanitation and health. That's what it stands for, the acronym. And today, Valentin, the CEO of Finnish, will give a short presentation. We'll take you along what our approach is in our program. So how do we get to the results? How do we achieve the impact? And then after Valentin has given us this short presentation, then Pam will come, Pamela Boondy, and she will explain more about the financial innovations that we are doing in our program. After that, we have a panel. And then Josine from Accra for all will also join the panel. And I will, of course, shortly introduce them also to you. And so that's the agenda for today. What we don't have any rules. We want actually as much engagement as possible. So if you have a question, and if people have not spoken the whole sentence, it doesn't matter if you interrupt. Because that will make it lively, and that's what we want. We want your real feedback, we want your questions. So please feel free to interact with us. So first, Valentin, you have been in the sector for 30 years, almost like a dinosaur in the sector. And I think almost everybody knows you in this room. And you are actually, you started your career at the UN.
Yeah.
And then you became a private consultant because you didn't like the UN. And in 2009, you started in India with the first start of Finnish, right?
Mm.
And in 2019, you promoted to the CEO of this program. And you have two sons. You live in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, two beautiful sons. And actually, when the sons get angry with him, they compare him to the wildebeest. So don't make him angry. So please go ahead.
So thanks. Actually, my son is using the one. I look like a wildebeest, just like a wildebeest. I look very smart, but I'm not. I hope you're gonna prove me wrong. So thanks. Like this. Fantastic. That's okay. Good. I think we really need your help. Oh, well, something's happening.
Yeah.
Okay, this one, we can check. Let's give him, oh, no, it is there.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
we had some nice questions actually. Oh, almost
Yeah.
forgot.
So I'm being demoted again. So-
Actually, yeah, we thought about, we wanted to, because we know it's, you have all eaten lunch and this nice dessert, so you know, we need, you need to get moving a little bit. So we want to start, so please stand up, everybody. So this is just an icebreaker. Lady asked her, she said in anger, if you were my husband, I would poison your coffee. And then somebody answered that to her and she said, he said, if you were my wife, I would even drink. So who said that? Was it Winston Churchill or was it Groucho Marx? So if you think it is Winston Churchill, please sit down. If you think it's Groucho Marx, please stay up. Well, Valentin, what's the answer?
Yeah, I think everyone who's sitting down was right.
It was Winston Churchill. So now we get more serious. How much fecal sludge ends up in the environment and treated? Well, more in general. And where is this, Valentin? This is, can we say this is like in Africa and globally? Globally? Yeah. So please stand up again. So if you think it is 80%, you can stay stand. If you think it's 70, you can sit down. It is 80. Right, one more. Is the repayment rate for sanitation loans higher or lower than regular income generating loans? So the answer one is the same or higher, or B, lower. And please stand up again. And if you think it's A, you can sit down. If you think it's B, lower, then you can remain standing. Okay, Pam, you know the answer. So could you please stand up and give the answer? Give somebody.
Majority of the room are correct. Is
Yeah.
8, the same or higher.
And can you tell a little bit more about the figures? The repayment rate?
So, in the case of Kenya, and you've seen it in most of the countries where we are working at the finish, you've seen that the non-repayment rate of sanitation loans is 1 to 3%. And the 3% is, it's paid back within 90 days. So it's an average of about 2%.
Really great. So now I won't make you stand anymore. It's now Valentin who will give a presentation.
Thanks. I'll try it again. Thanks. So in that scaling sanitation, you use something which you call the diamond model. Now don't count yourself rich, because we're not gonna distribute any diamonds, but it's a diamond model and it's a little bit the shape. And you could argue, is this really a diamond? Maybe it's not, but just to get you the basic ideas. So the context, I think we're in a WASH conference, so I don't need to dwell too much on it, on the numbers. But yeah, I think we all have seen this. Access to safely managed sanitation is a big issue. And if we continue like this, the last time we heard that UNICEF just coming up with new figures. But if we continue like we do, we'll be ending up with 2.4 billion people without access to safely managed sanitation by 2030. So that means that it's urgent and we need to do something. Fecal sludge, a lot of it ends up untreated in the environment. And of course, we have the terrible impact particularly on kids. And if you look at it, we talk about all these diseases, malaria, AIDS, measles, but this is a main killer. This is a bigger killer than those. So instead of me talking, and I hope technology is not coming.
Finish Mondial is a partnership between Waste, AMREF and Aqua for All, and stands for Financial Inclusion Improves Sanitation and Health. It's a programme working towards safe sanitation for all, and is implemented in India, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Bangladesh. Finish Mondial ensures people are aware of the need of a safe and durable toilet. They want to buy one, can afford it, and local people can build them. But what does this mean? Women like Anna from Kenya and girls like Juhi from India have a healthy and safe life and can develop themselves. They can work and go to school as they no longer get ill because of water-related diseases. Because of the Finish programme, sanitation marketeers like Emmy from Tanzania feel they are doing something for their community as they tell people about the importance of a safe and durable toilet, which trained masons like Manu from Ethiopia can build. They now run a successful sanitation business. And farmers like Abdul from Bangladesh use the fecal sludge from the newly built toilets as co-compost for crop production. Therefore, communities are healthier and have climate-resilient food. Finally, financiers like Mr. George from Uganda supply sanitation credit, and local governors like Miss Gamutu from Kenya stimulate sanitation market growth and awareness. By applying a multi-stakeholder approach, the Finish programme involves the entire sanitation value chain. Over 5.6 million people enjoy the benefits of safe sanitation thanks to the programme. This is only the beginning. Let's create a global sanitation revolution together.
Right, so
Finish Mondial is a partner.
I'm just going to repeat it on. So the nice thing with these is that the figures, you'll see it shortly, have changed tremendously. This film was, I think, 1 or 2 years old, and you'll see the new figures there are quite different. So what this is what we this is what we call the diamond model. Better?
No, maybe use this
All right,
one.
that's all. Yeah, right, yes.
Better? Yeah.
So this diamond model, we basically we start with communities because they are the ones purchasing sanitation systems. So what it is today is that if you go to any community in any of these 6 countries, by and large the demand for sanitation is not that great. There are people, there may be some people who are wanting it, but it's not really a explicit desire. For instance, you can find everyone, nearly everyone with something like this. How many people have a toilet? It's much less. So in the marketing we're doing, it's a sanitation marketing approach. We're making sure that they nearly, not as much as a telephone will never achieve that, but they nearly want it as badly as a telephone. So it's really something they want, they desire. So putting it up more on the priority listing, higher on the priority listing is the first step. Second step is if you really want to have a toilet, are there people around who can supply it and who can build it? And that's something where we have learned over the years. This is very, very critical in terms of getting value for your money. And we have a continuous drive to bring down the cost for reasons of affordability, but also since most of the people don't have sanitation, are pretty poor or really poor, we work with financial institutions and we don't want to change the financial systems. So financial institutions, microfinance, charge interest rates, and we don't want to do anything with subsidies. We don't finance hardware, we don't subsidize any loans. Reason is we want the markets to work. But we also realize it's expensive. So what is our approach is we reduce the cost of sanitation by right sizing, by having local materials, by also working on the reuse part that actually saves money in the long run. Then last but not least, the government. So the government in urban settings, they set policy guidelines, bylaws. So we work with the governments because some of the systems we are promoting are pretty new. So we need to change actually bylaws or even policies to get these systems accepted. We work with the government in, and I can see some people from Uganda, we work with the government in Uganda in changing the national curriculum for sanitation builders or artisans getting a sanitation well, it's not like a degree from a vocational training school. We work with the governments on the monitoring and evaluation. So the government for scaling, I think we all realize it's a very important activity. So I was talking about the numbers. So the film you saw was more or less before the pandemic. And in the pandemic, we managed to, well, the pace went down a little bit, but we have been able to do about 500,000 sanitation systems in that period, which we thought was actually pretty decent. And that resulted in 4 million workdays in construction alone. And one of the challenges we have is that employment is more than construction. There's supply side, supply chain economics, there are vendors, there are hardware stores. That's not included in this. We trained about 1,500 entrepreneurs, mostly on masonry, but also on things like soap making and other wash-related businesses. We train them technically and on business side. 34% of the entrepreneurs are female, and we mobilize some 105 million. Sorry, I shouldn't use euros. $105 million, now more or less 1:1. $105 million in financing for households. That's what we mobilize from the local markets. And 11,000 tons of human waste is reused annually. That means the human waste is actually being reapplied in the soil. And that's what we think when we talk about a safe and managed sanitation, that's the crux. So to give you a little bit of the numbers. So this is where we are today. From 2019, when we started, we didn't start from scratch. So we already had ongoing operations in India and Kenya. We added Uganda, Tanzania, Bangladesh, and Ethiopia in 2019. And the lines have been going up. So I would say they're moving in the right direction. The other one is the cost per unit, but that's not the cost of the sanitation system, that's the cost which we charge. So when we build markets, when we do the capacity development, that money also needs to be paid. So creating demand, doing the supply side, engaging governments, importantly monitoring impact analysis, that's all part of what we call the facilitation cost. What's not there is the hardware cost. So if we take our typical safely managed sanitation system, has a value of about $250 to $300, then we do every 90 seconds, we do a sanitation system. So I don't know how long I've been talking, but let's say I've been talking 9 minutes, then you would have done 6 sanitation systems. Well, obviously not by me, by others. And that will be valued at $1,500. So per day, we mobilize about $200,000 from the local markets. The interesting part is, another interesting facet, if you look at the cost per country. And when we started in Ethiopia, our costs were sky high. I was looking, and when we were looking at it, we may better do it as a donation, give the hardware as well, but the system, selling the system in Ethiopia proved to be quite tough. But now, as you can see, the line from this is Ethiopia. The line from Ethiopia actually was beyond the graph. So this has come down now, and we are expecting it to come, because of the size of the Ethiopian market, we expect it to come further down. Tanzania was also a new country for us, so we initially had more, the costs were a little higher. That's also has come down. Then you see this one is Bangladesh. There, the costs for Bangladesh are pretty high because we are looking at safely flood-proof prone sanitation. That's a challenge. Honestly, it's a challenge. So we are still setting up the systems, training the masons, getting this government behind it, etc. So that's why the costs in Bangladesh are pretty high. We had our operations were severely affected in Kenya during COVID, so actually our costing went the wrong way. We all the time wanted to go down, and there it went up. But it also has to do with the numbers. There's a cost per unit. So if your numbers are lower, then automatically you have the same costing, then it looks like it's going up. And that's what happened in Kenya. Then Uganda, they're slowly coming down. And India, they're going up a little bit, but we are not sure if that's really going to happen. But it has to do with the eastern part of India, that's also flood prone or flood prone. And we want to do the flood prone proof systems. So the dotted lines is where we are today. So that's what our projections. But projections, as you know, it's they can be misleading as well. That's what we think today. That's on the base of the data we have today. That's where we are. Let's say the lines are what we have. So next to let's say the numbers, we are also dealing with a what I would say a social problem. So voice is social, but within the number game, we also have to look at leave no one behind. And that's of course dealing with microfinance, that's quite challenging. So what we do in the financially innovation pro-poor approach, financial institutions, they always start with financial literacy. So they will never take, no one will get a loan without being trained on financial literacy. That's a requirement, otherwise the loan will not even be issued. We have platforms for group savings. We get a volume, and that's in the volume game, this economies of scale. They're gonna be able to drive the cost down. That's based on the sanitation water impact fund. We work on climate resilient systems. I talked a little bit already about the flood prone proof system, which we have piloted in India with the government for the last 2 years. And everything on the biogas has collapsed. I have to, but the ones which are non-biogas, they survived. So there's a good news and there's bad news. The biogas is not because the biogas was wrong, but because we made some construction mistakes with local contractors. So I'm not saying anything. I like biogas, so there's nothing against biogas, but it's our experience. And next, the circular sanitation business creation. And there we are working on a number of models. By and large, all our models in the sanitation value chain or in the reuse system are getting investments from the government. It's public money for the hardware. We're not going to invest in hardware. But what we do think and what we do see is on the operation and maintenance side, on running the business, selling the products, that's much more a private undertaking. And in India, our projections today are that we will break even in 2023 with the first company of our first company in this. Then we look into creation and preservation of livelihoods. We talked about local employment generation, and in discussions with the government, and that's everywhere, this is a critical part for them. There are so many youths running around, and the youth need something to do, and they need to have livelihoods. So the sanitation sector itself is underperforming in terms of livelihood. Public health gains, I think that I don't need to talk too much about it. Climate change adaptation, that's again coming to the flood prone proof system, but also healthier soils. Healthier soils, if you apply carbon-rich waste back into the soil, your soils improve, and by that improvement, they hold water much better. So it's a long-term thing, but it has, we think, a tremendous impact. And of course, the reduction of poverty that we've seen in many of the places where we have been for some time, that poverty levels have come down and people actually look much happier. They are much happier and they definitely are much healthier. So I think I'll leave it at this matter if you allow me.
All right. Thank you. Are there any questions for clarification for Valentin? There will be a panel discussion, so it's more for clarification. There's no, yeah, there's.
Good question. You mentioned the. Thank you. Hi, I'm Caroline from FYI. You mentioned the cost of the hardware per toilet is $200 to $300.
Yeah.
I'm impressed that it's quite low, and research we've done in multiple countries, there was more $800 to $900 for that people locally build, not
Yeah,
something that engineered. So I'm just curious if you could say more about the technology or the materials.
Do you want to answer my question?
No, maybe so, this one I can remember.
Thank you so much. My name is Mr. Agreni, also user. Just some more clarification on the primary ventilation systems. Because one of the major challenges we are facing is the fact that most of these areas that are climate change prone and look like for a bunch of more households cannot afford to construct planning plans or durable transition system. So at the end of the day, after each episode of climate, rainfall or whatever, so how do we support? Do you have any mechanism of supporting this for action in this environment? What's your experience? Because that's actually a major problem.
Thank you so much. Project Smith from Uganda. Probably you can answer now for later, but you talked about reuse. And I wanted to know what your organization is doing to ensure that the byproducts are safe for reuse and that they don't cause health risks when you use for growing them crops.
Great. Yeah, so let me just answer in the reverse order. So I'll start with the products. So yes, if you take products made from human waste contains pathogens, and we all know that, right? So the product, we use two types of technologies, maybe too much a word. One is simply time. We buy time. If they are in the soil for 2 to 5 years, that's a standalone systems. Then when we test the products afterwards, they're free of pathogens. All the pathogens have died. And the level of helminths, because that's, some people are focused on helminths, level of helminths is the same as in the environment. This conforms to WHO standards. So that's on the household level. If you talk about, let's say, getting the plants, the fecal site treatment plants, their situation is slightly different. So we take the fecal sites, we dry it to a certain level. From there, we take the organic, mostly organic household waste. We want a co-composting process. We bring the temperature up to 70 degrees, and that's measured, monitored, etc. That kills the pathogens, but that's not enough. So afterwards, we again take it to the lab. So we spend a lot of time on lab testing. And it's needed to establish the production process, to establish also the trust of the buyers. And finally, we test also the products, it means the foods grown with it. And it's done by the Indian Council for Agricultural Research. They've done an extensive study on the first set, but we need a 5-year, we have a 5-year contract with them to measure the long-term effects on the soil. And we think it's really going to be a game changer. That's what we expect. Now coming to the people with less money, we can go down in our costing. It's not impossible. When going for local materials, we have been able to reduce from, if I take Ethiopia, we went from 17,000 to 9,000 beer. I don't know the current exchange rate, but from the 9,000 we're going down, although the prices are going up, they are going down. And how we do that? By changing materials to bamboo, for instance. We're using now bamboo in construction. So local materials, because we don't care about the superstructure. Honestly, if people want to buy, make it out of marble, it's their choice. If they want to make it out of bamboo, again, their choice. What we do care about is the substructure, what's happening below there, because that's where the health impact is realized. So our cost, the lowest one we have, which we still would consider safely managed, is about $100. Going further below, that will be pennywise and pound foolish. So the household would invest, but would invest year after year after year. The problem occurs in the flood-prone roof areas. And there are different types of floods. The annual ones in Bangladesh, if the flooding is, let's say, 20, 30 centimeters, that's the one we are targeting. If it's 2 or 3 meters, then sanitation is not your concern, it's something else. No, you want to, you have different issue. On the posting, we have 4 systems, more or less 4 systems. We use a double lead split, we use a double VIP, we use a biogas link toilet, and I think, and a septic tank, not so big. The biogas and septic tank ones are the most expensive, and they come to about $400 to $500. So maybe your costing would be on the, perhaps, but I know I'm speculating now, but it could be on the dimensioning of the toilets. We don't go very deep. So that could be one reason. It could be the choice of materials, maybe. And also, if you keep on doing it, at one point in time, people will learn and the cost should come down. But we can have a talk about it and maybe we can help you.
Now we go on to the next part of the presentation, which is really about financial inclusion. So Pam, would you come up? Pam has quite some experience in the area of finance. She has been working in the financial sector for 16 years. And she always wanted to work on the impact. So it was first finance for agriculture. And since, what was it again? Since 2014, you're working in the sanitation area, right? And well, some nice facts about Pamela. She lives in Nairobi, Kenya. She has 3 kids. And whenever she makes her children mad, what will happen is that they will change her icons on Netflix, and then she cannot find her own icon, and sometimes they are embarrassing. So that's just something nice about Pam. Pam, please take it away.
Thank you. So my presentation of this part of the presentation will focus a lot more on the financial inclusion component of the program, and will narrow down to 2 financial innovations that we run under Commission India. But just a brief background on financial inclusion is that we work with financial institutions within the 6 countries where we operate in, and this range from commercial banks, microfinance institutions, and also the savings and credit organizations. Below that level, we're also exploring, or we've been working with the informal groups where they've been having their own informal financing mechanisms through the table banking and the merry-go-rounds. And the genesis of this is that we realized that focusing on only the formal financing mechanisms, there's a segment that is being left out. So how can we tap into this particular segment and move them from informal to formal financing to the formal financing system? So the 2 financial innovations I'll speak about, one of them looks at the informal financing mechanisms, how we're tapping into those with the table banking and the merry-go-rounds. And the second part of it looks at how do we scale up the financial inclusion when we are already working with the formal financing system. So the first one is called the transactional ledger. And the background of this is that with the informal, the merry-go-rounds, these community groups that do table banking, we realized there are challenges that they face within the community that hinder them from accessing or preferring the formal financing mechanism. And one of them is the cost to travel, let's say, to these towns. And secondly, the time that it's taken. So you find because of these challenges, they'd rather just operate within their own groups, save money within each other, lend to each other, and keep the money within that setup. Secondly, is the fact that this kind of informal financing is actually being used by very many. So when we look at a country like Kenya, financial inclusion levels, we can see they're really high. The percentages are high. But what are we looking at is that almost every or over 80% of Kenyans have a bank account. But the question is, are they using it? The answer is no. The percentage that is using it or on a regular basis is even less than 20%. So this percentage that is in between, what are we doing with them, or how do we ensure that we capture them, and specific for the wash sector, because at the end of the day, that is our interest. But then the thing is, the moment they are financially included in wash, other sectors also gain, and also other areas of their lives benefit from this. So the transactional ledger is actually a very light application, which we are using to bridge the informal and informal financing mechanisms. And here we are targeting, of course, the groups, individuals, the households, and also entrepreneurs within these communities. And it digitizes their savings and credit. So traditionally, they will, within the table banking setup, they save money, write it in, let's say, a black book, give the treasurer to go and keep the money somewhere. If one of them requires a loan, again, they write on that book that we've given, let's say, Pamela or Naneka a loan, and when they repay, they write in the black book again. So with the ledger, we are digitizing this process for them and creating a central warehouse, which they operate themselves. So we give them the platform, they decide the operating modalities within their own group, the same way they decide within their bylaws or other standard operating procedures within the group. And these are mechanisms that they capture within the application. And it's very light and simple to use. So what are we solving with the transactional ledger, just to get into a bit of details? And here we look at it from two perspectives, because as I mentioned, is that we are looking at getting these communities eventually to the formal financing mechanism. Because with the informal, the funding can never be enough. They'll be operating within what they have. But how can we ensure that at some point they're able to access 10 times beyond their savings, or 100 times beyond their savings, because that's what they require to grow. So for the financial institutions, from their side, is that they have minimal or little willingness to invest or to lend towards water and sanitation. And we may dwell a lot more on sanitation, because we know for water, the FIs are more attracted to water than sanitation. There are also high acquisition costs. What we've seen over the last 2 years, that the traditional microfinance model is dying, and it's because of the high acquisition cost. Initially, microfinance institutions would send their officers to the communities every week or every 2 weeks. At some point, it reduced to a month. Currently, they hardly do that. Why? Because travel costs are really high, and of course, other related costs. And second, the other bit is that it's also time consuming. So what is the opportunity here that the financial institutions have? When these communities and these groups utilize the transactional ledger, they already have a repository of their financial information, their savings trends within that setup, the trends with which they're repaying their loans, and they can utilize this information and submit it to the financial institution for consideration for additional loans. And this will help the FI increase their portfolio, their customer base, and of course, the income that comes with it. When we look at the household and the entrepreneurs, my starting point was the time taken, and of course, the cost for them to move to the formal financing institutions. But also, one of the challenges is that they get into a comfort zone when they're doing this stable banking. There's a tendency to prefer that over utilizing formal financing mechanisms. And lastly, is the fact that they can only access the funding that they have saved within themselves. So the opportunity for them is that they can lower the cost of borrowing. And how does this happen? They've already built a trend or a track record using the application. So that can be used as a negotiating tool with the formal financing mechanisms. Then secondly is the fact that they can access more money. If it's, let's say with the savings and credit organizations, they can access at least 3 times their savings. If it's with the microfinance institutions, they can access up to 5 times their savings. So they're able to access additional funding. And of course, other financial products and services, because with financial inclusion, we don't want it to end at just water and sanitation. We'd like them to access asset loans, something for agriculture, something for their businesses, and wholesome development of their lives. So how the platform works is that one, it provides the group repository, data collection that they can save, they can record their savings and the loans that they give each other. And when we're talking of things like loans, it is designed in such a way that if the group decides that 2 people or 3 people within the group are the ones to approve these loans, then the app prompts them to do this approval. It also records their their business transactions, because most of the groups that we are working with in the communities, we also encourage them to get into wash businesses. So when they do sales of their products, for instance, in one of the counties of Kitui in Kenya, we are working with community health volunteers that we supported them to get into sanitation businesses of selling Sato products. So when they sell these products, they're able to record their sales within the platform. And when they incur expenses to buy the merchandise, they also record the same. A disclaimer, the application is based on M-Pesa. So the transactions are done by M-Pesa. So it's, how can I put it? Like at the end of the day, nobody is really holding the money. And in cases where, let's say, one of them has the hard currency, they can give it to the treasurer who deposit it to M-Pesa. And the step further with this application is that it's also linked to the financial institutions. Secondly, is that they're able to generate financial reports from the application, statements, general statements that will just show deposits, withdrawals, balance, and the same also for their business transactions, which will show income, expenses, profit or loss. Very simple for the basic group to follow. And that is a part that with the application also, it provides good profiling, and their financial behavior can be evaluated using this. And this is something that now the financial institutions can use as they onboard them and consider them for additional credit. So the next 2 are testimonials of groups, 2 groups that are using the application. This is both groups are in Kitui County. And this is a group of ladies, and I think it only has 1 gentleman within the group. You can see from this is that we're also very gender sensitive, and we are including women in this. Of course, there's also we hear that women are the best payers when it comes to credit. But then the group, prior to being trained within the transactional ledger, they really did not have much savings, and they were in the verge of dissolving. And why is this? Most of the groups will start with the best of intention, but along the way, maybe trust issues occur. They feel maybe record keeping is not being done well, so they drop out or they stop savings and the like. So for this particular group, we can see, we've seen that their savings have been built over time out of this application. Sometimes it's little money, very little money, but what matters is building that regular culture of saving. You can see from the small app there, I mean, a screenshot of the app, that they've only saved 21,957 Kenya shillings. That's about $210 or so. But then you can imagine this a group where maybe they're saving $1 in 2 weeks or $1 in a month. So it's something as compared to them doing nothing. And that's like the first step of towards financial inclusion. The second group is this Kalimani. They are doing business. They actually sell the Sato products, and they've been using the app also to record their sales and expenses within the group. And you can see our focus initially is sanitation, but they can use this for many other things within their livelihoods. So I'll move over to the next innovation that we have within the program. So the middle ground of it is where we are working, of course, with these 3 sets of financial institutions to offer wash loans towards the communities that we work with. But then also comes the other bit where these financial institutions will suffer, let's say, gaps such as liquidity. Demand has really been created for their products, or maybe they feel they're not very comfortable lending towards the wash sector. Maybe they find it risky, or liquidity levels are low. So we have the sanitation and water impact fund. Sorry, I think this, we forgot to edit that. Currently, it's a fund. Initially, it was a bond, but we switched it to a fund. And with this, oh, sorry, let me not confuse you. Initially, it was a bond during the initiation stage in 2019. And so we recently received the independent evaluation of the same, and this proof of concept led now to the development of the Sanitation and Water Impact Fund, which is being rolled out now for the next about, the first round is for the coming 3 years. And with this, what are we looking at is to increase access, of course, again, to safe sanitation and water using private debt. So you realize for us, we're not only looking at donor or grant funding, but how can we bring in the rest of the private sector to prioritize and also invest into the wash space. And the SWIFT will be a series of social impact funds totaling to about $250 million US. And it's supporting the financial institutions to improve their liquidity. So there are 2 levels of it, of the FIs that can offer loans directly to the communities or to the households and small and micro entrepreneurs, but also providing wholesale loans to either the smaller MFIs or circles for them to on lend to communities, households, and entrepreneurs, and of course the smaller, let's say, institutions. And these loans, at the end of the day, in terms of impact, we're looking at reaching a big number of sanitation systems, or the households building a big number of sanitation systems, which I'll share as I continue with my presentation. So what is the investment strategy behind it? Is that there's a funding structure where we have a series of funds that will be channeled to the financial sector. And there's a target return to it, because we know the private sector does not do anything, let's say, for free. They expect a return. But the good thing is that here, there's a market return or the financial return, but also the social return that we are looking into. In terms of the market return, we're looking at about 2% to 4%, and that is net of the fees and commissions attached to it. And of course, the risk that is normally also attached to loans that are being issued. Indicative cost is that the total expense is about 1.5%, so that is really low. But then in terms of risk, is that one, let me just say that this is, we are looking, the funding, we are initially the fund source is Dutch pension funds, yes? But we're also looking at fundraising more money for this, just to increase, and there's also the first loss guarantee that is provided to the sector, especially the financial institutions, because again, we're looking at how do we lower the risk for the financial institutions. The payment will be a bullet payment by the financial institution by the end of year 3, that's for the first round. So how it works, it's like a loan to the financial sector, but with a small interest rate, so they on lend to clients, and at some point the financial institutions will repay the money and of course retain the profits or other income that they have gained from this. Just put maybe in layman's language. The questions, do we start with the questions before we finish, Annika?
Yeah, no, we want as much as interaction as possible, right? So that's why we said we want questions.
Yeah, I think my question is on the exchange rates risk.
Yes.
Was looking at the funds that come in euros. The repayment here, I think this looks usually about 2 to 4%. Yeah, that's, I can say, quite low. But then the exchange rate, the shilling can be devalued.
Yeah.
Then now how do you cover that payment from the customers?
So there are hedging instruments that have been put in place to cover this, and there are 2 ways of looking at it. Is that the fund can either be issued in local currency, and when it's in local currency, that will mean that the interest rate might be higher, cover that risk, that exchange rate risk. So there's always need to evaluate, do we take it in local currency or foreign currency, and what are the risks associated with it? But also part of the fundraising is also to get organizations and institutions that can offer the first loss guarantee and even second loss guarantees that, and some of the risks like now the exchange rate risk that will come about. Thank you.
Yeah, it's all edged, 100% match.
There are quite some questions there. I think them and then I get to my feet, okay?
So that was also my question on the foreign exchange risk, but the second question is, you're saying Dutch pension funds, they don't have a requirement to invest in investment grade securities? And they consider this investment grade? Why? Because the protection structure?
Okay, so two of my questions have been answered. If I could understand the mode of operation, it's more like a social fund, right? It's like a sanitation fund. Okay. So you rent or you give this money to the institutions, and then the institutions have to loan to the beneficiaries, right? Is that how it works?
I can start with that question. We take the that one.
I think it's good, and then you can go for it.
Hi, Andy Robinson, consultant. So my question is much easier than these very complicated financial questions. I was interested by the app, and because I think it's a great way of reducing costs and increasing accessibility. I just wondered on the scale, how many people do you have actively using that app?
Okay.
I'll start with Andy's question. So on the application, currently we have about 300 active users. And it's because the application was just developed in the last about 3 years. So we've been, first year, it was a lot more testing. So we had restricted usage and access, like you understand with any digital thing, there are always the technicalities here and there. So it's only this year that we started with scale up, but in a controlled environment, a bit controlled. Again, just to ensure that, because it's dealing with money, we don't want to go full scale and then maybe something goes wrong along the way. So we are onboarding more clients slowly. And at this point, it also comes with a lot of training of these groups, because as you realize, they're rural-based groups. So we do a lot of one-on-one trainings with them as we onboard them to utilize the app before we can allow them to continue on their own.
Maybe there are other questions?
How does the funding flow from funding to institution to clients and then?
Oh, yes. Yeah, on the second question, I don't, maybe I go to my second, can I go to my next slide? It actually had the answer to that. Not this one. Yeah. Actually, this should answer most of the questions. Yeah. So with this is that we have the investors there, and in this case, it's the Dutch pension funds to start with. And the money now is put into Actium. Actium is the investor in this case. Yeah. And Actium has pre-selected a number of financial institutions within all the countries that we work in under Finish. And the money now is channeled to the FIs for them to issue loans for sanitation. However, there's a TA component that comes with it, and the TA component covers both the client and the financial institutions. And that's where now Finish Mondial plays a big role in terms of the technical assistance. And part of it is also us connecting or linking clients to the financial institutions to access these loans, especially at the onset, and also the entrepreneurs that we work with and train. At the end of it all is that there'll be this external verification that is done by an independent verifier in terms of the usage of the sanitation and water loans that have been taken by the financial institutions. And secondly, also the FIs, the loans that they give towards the sector, they actually go towards water and sanitation or sanitation. So an independent verifier undertakes that role. And now the last part of it is that we have Aqua for All, That of course, the independent verification is also in line with APA for all role within the consortium. And they provide a 1% discount or interest rate discount to the FIs. This is more of like an incentive to the FIs to do well, to issue these loans, but also to follow up that the loans are repaid well by the clients. So basically, this is how it flows. And with the whole fund at the moment, initially we are looking at 2.6 million safely managed toilets using this fund, where 13 million people will have been reached. And of course, the job creation of 26 million work days, because each toilet creates 10 work days, and with 5.2 million people financially included. Thank you.
So
The last-
do the FIs put any of their own money into this, or is it only your money that you've raised that is being used for this? Do they put
So-
any of their own?
This funding is mainly to catalyze their own funding. So the middle ground of it is that the FIs have already put their money. So you remember, I mentioned there is the clientele that we have not tapped yet, who we are using the application, but there is also FIs that are already lending towards the sector, and at some point they face liquidity issues. Now this is the additional liquidity that we are bringing in. This means that within our normal operating space, the FIs that we work with already are putting in their own money towards sanitation and water loans. So it's just to augment what they already do.
Ratio is of their own money to the money you're bringing in from the investors?
Let me put it like this, but also my colleagues can assist me. Majority of the FIs in Kenya are doing between 3 to 5% of their loan book. That is what is going to sanitation. And you'll find maybe the loan book is about 10 million Kenya shillings. I'm trying to do the quick math, or 20 million, no, sorry, not million, billion. Yeah, so that should be 10 million or so.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
take up
something-
2 zeros, right?
Yeah, something like that, so, yeah. So take about 3 to 5% of that is already going to wash, so. The quick math, it's not coming to my head right now, sorry.
Yeah, so if I want to understand, I don't mean that your fund helps the financial institution as probably administrative costs to make the loan a bit cheaper.
No, completely, we do not distort the market completely, so our model is zero subsidy. And in terms of financial institutions, that means we do not offer any interest rates, like we don't interfere with the market interest rates. So if market interest rates are at 15%, the sanitation and water loan will also be at 15%. The only thing that we have brought on board is the technical assistance that we'll be offering to these FIs to understand the sector more.
Okay, let me, so maybe, because.
Yeah, but how are you going to regulate the lending rates to the last mile customers? Kind of what you're saying, because that is where this portion of the model usually may start. Because you will not have control on some of those things. Are we sure that if we let, the markets determine that we are going to attain the sanitation outcome we are aiming at? Yeah. So I'm getting a bit confused, if you can help me. If it's supposed to be a sanitation fund, sort of, it's supposed to cushion the beneficiary or the last person to have access in constructing their latrines. But then if it's going to be the same rate as everybody in the market, what is it then for the beneficiary or the poor? That's one. And then what is also the terms of payment for the beneficiary? How flexible is it?
So I'm going to let you answer these two very difficult questions, and then after that, we will have a panel, so. Because we still have that also, one sometime for that.
I like the last question because you kind of answered it also. In that, okay, like I mentioned, we don't have to distort the market because we are a program or project, yeah. Currently finishes the program, but then we're looking at, let's say, in the next 5 years, we should be getting into new markets. So what happens, let's say, to a market like Kenya that has already been built, or Uganda? We'd like the FIs there, the other stakeholders to take full charge of what is going on. So in that way, we completely would not like to, let's say, interfere with how the interest rates or how they appraise these loans, because in most cases, when you do that, what happens is that people have a tendency to take wash loans and put them to other things. So I'll walk into a bank, I take a wash loan, and I have zero intentions to build a toilet. I take that loan towards school fees. But if it's at the same interest rate, if I want a wash loan, I'll take a wash loan. If I want a school fees loan, I'll take a school fees loan. So that prevents a lot of distortion of the market, but also improves the repayment of the loans. Now, how is this client cushioned? Part of our TA is supporting these FIs to develop loan products or these wash loan products. So how the client is cushioned is, let's say, in terms of repayment, a loan that will be repaid in 6 months or 3 months, because it's a small ticket size, this loan can be spread over a longer time. They pay smaller installments. Of course, it comes also with the financial literacy part of it, because the longer you pay the loan, the more interest you pay. But at the end of the day, what is more important is the access to this money. I started my career in microfinance. And with microfinance, one of the things that we see with clients is that repayment is not the biggest problem. Interest rates are not the biggest problem. At some point in Kenya, microfinance loans were at 28%. But communities or people really didn't care, because what they really needed was to access the money in the first place. Yeah. So how they incentivize these things, like, can they get this money a bit on friendlier terms in terms of the tenor? The interest rate might not be as friendlier, but the fact that they can access the money, the fact that they can use group collateral to access these loans instead of the traditional collaterals like title deeds or logbooks and the likes, that to them is good enough. And that is an incentive to them to take up these loans. So the same model is what we have replicated towards the sanitation and water sector, so that access is achieved. There was your question again on inclusion. In the poor inclusion. Yeah. How we like looking at it, and again, I'll refer to microfinance, is the fact that even the poorest of the poor, when they want to get credit for something, they look in themselves, how can we repay this loan? I'll give an example of our program in Uganda. Majority of the communities we target are farmers, and they grow bananas. Yeah. So as we market to them sanitation, we also show them that these bananas that are growing in your farm can actually be utilized to repay the loan for sanitation. And sometimes you get it wrong when you talk of financial inclusion and we're just looking at it in terms of loans only. It can also be the savings part of it, because we know our African communities, sometimes we're scared of loans. But what if these same people are encouraged that if you do not like loans, then you can save for the next 6 months, the next 12 months, towards the toilet that you want, or the water facility that you want, or the water filter, that kind of thing. So financial inclusion for us is broader than the loans. So the loans are normally like what everyone is interested in. So we forget that first.
Yeah. So shall we go and sit in the panel, and then you can take a question again in the panel. So please. Sorry.
Yes, we're finished.
You are finished, huh? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Good. So we now have a panel discussion. Please, Pam, go ahead and Jonathan, and I would also like to invite Josine. Josine, I have not introduced, and as I like to introduce people, I will go ahead. So Josine, she has 25 years of experience in the development finance, and she has been working with the Rabobank, and she has been director of the Dutch platform for impact investors. And since 3 years, she's now actually the managing director of Aqua for All. And she is based in the Netherlands, still officially in Utrecht, but moving soon. And she is she's having one son, And he came with her. He is now strolling around on the campus, trying to see what student life is looking here in the US. And well, I have walked on the campus and it's really a lovely campus. So maybe he might be convinced to study here. Anyway, so let's start with the first question, Valentin, by Louis Burson.
Yeah. So, Louis, you were asking about the legal requirements, the fiduciary requirements of the sanitation water impact fund from the point of view institutional investors, pension funds. In the current scenario, the risk return profile is not suitable for them. So there are two things which we can do, is we can change the returns, in which case we would price the product out of the market, so it will be more expensive. So what's the other thing we can do? That's the risk perception and the risk profiling. So we work with a first loss guarantee, and negotiations are going on with the European Investment Bank, and we are working on the second loss guarantee. And by having those two guarantees in place, the fiduciary requirements are met. It's not going to be a big money earner for the pension funds. It's not going to be the main money maker, but it meets legal requirements.
All right, these were quite technical questions, but Josine, why do we want to involve the financial sector at this moment in the wash sector? Why do we want it? Because we are discussing it, but why?
I think that Pam already did a great job because, we need to point out that access to financial services is one of the great drivers behind the thinking of the sanitation and water impact funds that we're going to establish. So what we see in the market, and I'm using the OECD figures of 2018 already, so they're quite old. When I started in this job, I had a look at it. And you see that, according to OECD, we needed 114 billion euros or dollars, and we only had 5 available. So that is, less than 3% that is available to meet the SDG targets that we agreed on. And so I was thinking like, okay, if we're going to use the grant funding that we receive from our Dutch government very wisely, we just need to simply start catalyzing private capital. Because it's not only the huge service gap that we're looking at currently, there's also a huge financing gap out there. And we just simply need to come up with solutions for it. And the SWIFT is one of the, very good initiatives that is going to provide liquidity in the market. And then why is the providing of the liquidity so important? Not only for households, but also for SMEs. So the small and medium-sized enterprises that are operating in the water and sanitation space also need access to financial services. And what we often see is that, I've been working with impact investors for all my life. What I see is not always only about, not wanting to engage in a certain sector. It's also about the risk, or even better, the perceived risk. So in the past, I've been working with those investors to start mobilizing private capital, either for microfinance, for SME financing, for greening portfolios, or even for, refugees to have access to financial services. And what I've always seen is that they need to really understand the sector for them to then start providing that, capital towards whatever SDG we select. And so now over the past 3 years, you see that there's a lot more appetite from investors to start, also embracing water and sanitation as an important sector within the whole range of SDGs that they've already onboarded.
And do you see that there are many barriers for financiers in the financial sector to engage in the wash scene? And do you see solutions for those barriers?
There are barriers. There are also opportunities, and the barriers differ a lot. So in the case of the sanitation water impact fund, it's really about providing liquidity to financial institutions that then operate in their local market. So it's really about creating that local infrastructure that is so much needed, because it doesn't make sense to, get only American capital into, Bangladesh or so to get, to develop the sector. The most important thing that we need to do is to develop the local financial markets to provide liquidity to their own SMEs and households. That's one. I already addressed the fact that it's often perceived risk, because once there's an understanding, once there's data, and Pamela already addressed the fact that, if you look at the performance of the loans with the financial institutions, we already know, we compared notes, we know it from water.org and others that, if you look at the performance, it's not so different as if compared to the other portfolios, the microfinance portfolios. That gives us comfort, but it's still too little information, I would say. If you look at enterprises operating in the space, and we all meet with the entrepreneurs that are out there in sanitation and water, they also need capital. They need capital to grow their businesses. They struggle with finding the right kind of, growth capital, because it's simply not out there. So when I started in the sector, I saw that many of the enterprises were just not even reaching the point of break even. And at the same time, they were already operating in 3 different countries. I started the conversation with those enterprises and I said, like, look, in my perspective, you would build your company and then start to, try and develop other markets. What they indicated to me is that, we cannot, because there's not that growth capital that we need. But there is grant funding that is asking us, the donors are asking us to start up different pilots in different countries, in other regions. And so, it's also the call to the people out here in this workshop. Like, let's also make sure that we are actually think along with those enterprises, because they need to simply grow their businesses. If we look at, again, back to the service gap that's out there, it's enormous. So we must make sure that we support enterprises in the right way.
Yeah, I have the feeling that there are still some burning questions in the audience, and that's actually great. So please, I'm going to collect a few questions.
Thank you all so much for your presentations and discussion. I was curious if you thought that this model could apply to household connections to municipal services, especially sewer sanitation.
More questions? Okay, so first, like this one. You want to take this one?
Yeah. Oh, you want to take it, Pam?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
ladies first.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll say yes, it does. And we're actually working on the same in Kenya. In 2 of the counties that we are working in, we've also partnered with water utilities, and the water utilities interest is on the household water connections. Now, this is even more interesting for the financial institutions, because we are talking about water, and what we're seeing from practice is that financial institutions are so interested in water. One, because when we're working with the water utilities, it means there's a water bill that goes out to the household. Yeah. And with that water bill, when they make their monthly payment, a surcharge or a fee can be added that will translate to the loan repayment. What now this means is that, or how I can put it differently, is the fact that the financial solution for water connections or sewer connections can be structured differently, in that the loan is mainly with the water utility, and the households now get the connection either to water or to the sewer network, and within their monthly repayment to the water utility can again just pay directly to the financial institution. So our model is not cast on stone. We always customize it to what is required, which are the different partners that we are working with, who is involved in this. If it's the water utility, they're also part of the whole process, they're part of the loan product, and yeah.
maybe just to add to this, we are also doing it in Tanzania with Monza utility. And that's both a loan for household connection to the sewer, and household, like Pam saying, household water connection. But sometimes we find it's not needed. So when we did a small borehole sewer in Nakuru, Kenya, we found that the households, when they were converting their toilets, it was not that expensive. So they connected directly to a small borehole sewer. So they're, like Pam was saying, we're whatever is the requirement of the market, and we don't want to distort the market.
Good questions, yes.
Hi, Erin Custer with Lixel and Sato. Can you speak to the balance of loans that go to households versus possibly to entrepreneurs or working capital? Sort of how do you think about that mix in your portfolio?
You have more questions?
It's interesting because what we've seen in terms of the numbers, the higher numbers are with the household, but in terms of the ticket sizes, it's with the entrepreneurs. So you find like 80% or 70% of the loans are to households, 30% are to entrepreneurs, but then in terms of the portfolio, it's the other way around.
Maybe to add, we are working with 3 banks in Kenya. In addition to what is going on under the Finish Mondial program. So of course, if you look at the program, it's mostly about households. If you look at the portfolios of the banks that we work with, then it's more towards SMEs. And it depends, Yeah.
In any of the countries where you're working, are the pension funds in those countries able to invest in something like this? Because it's sort of interesting you're going to the Dutch pension funds, but I presume there are some pension funds in Kenya and other places. If you're providing that level, it sounds like a fair degree of support to the Dutch pension funds. If you provided that level of support to the local pension funds, would that get them involved, and then you wouldn't have the currency risk?
Great, thank you so much for this great presentation. I just had a question. So if the financial institutions are going to be getting access to the cost of capital at a very low rate for this period of this bond or whatever financial products fall, is the assumption that your support will withdraw as well as that subsidized rate at the end of 5 years, or will it be continuing to be subsidized, like having a lower cost of capital for sanitation products on an ongoing basis?
Hi, sorry, from the Stoke Family Foundation. Is there a process for how the loans are monitored and in terms of how the funds are spent? Is there any capacity building of local institutions to monitor that and to check that? I guess that's another way that the market could potentially be distorted.
Who wants to take a question? Shall we start with that?
I'll start with I'll take the last question on how the loans are monitored. So part of what we do with the financial institutions is we offer technical assistance, and a big part of that technical assistance is product development. Now with the product development also comes in, how do they monitor these loans? So we look into their internal MIS. Are they capturing wash loans independently? And even where they have, let's say, a wash product, are they able to separate what went to sanitation or has gone to water and hygiene respectively? And if that is missing, we work towards adding that component into their reporting system so that it's also like at the end of the month or end of the week, at a push of the button, a report can be populated. So the second bit of it is that with monitoring, when we're starting our presentation, we showed that ours is a multi-stakeholder model. So there's government involved, there's the program team involved, the FIs, the businesses. So these different entities, including the communities themselves, also act as monitoring agents for the program. Because when a household takes a loan, let's say for a toilet, there's the mason who's going to build that toilet. At some point, they'll engage a community health volunteer or even the public health officer to check even on the quality of the toilet. So those are also additional monitoring mechanisms that are in place. And the good thing is that with the public health system or the government is that for them, it's beyond a program or beyond a project. It's their day-to-day work. So even after 5 years, 10 years, it's something that they continue doing, which means we are already building a monitoring mechanism that continues beyond what we are doing in the countries.
And Pamela, as to the question of, the local pension funds of Lowy, can you say something about how that is developed in the Kenyan context? Because I know that with the Kenya Food Water Fund, it was already tried to mobilize local capital funding, isn't it?
Yes.
From the local pension funds and others, etc. But that was still a little bit of a bridge too far. Can you comment on that, or is that as much as you?
Yeah, I'll just add something small to what you say. The good thing is that the progress is slow, but there's something going on. Because what I know is that Treasury has already approved it, and that is a big step towards the right direction. So it's something that is in progress within the country. It's taking longer than anticipated because I think we started off in 2018, 2019, but at some point we shall get there where local funding is also invested into the sector. It's also involving the Capital Markets Authority. So we can see already it's something that is going to be big once it materializes. Thank you.
And can you say something about those 5 years? What will happen after, or
That's
the second question?
okay, the second question on cost of capital, right? So it is indeed an incentive to, lower interest rates indeed for cost of capital. And that's really to incentivize the FIs to build up as much as possible a portfolio in water and sanitation. Because in the case that's not happening, they could also choose to use that funding towards agriculture or something else. So we really want them to make an effort and build up that portfolio. We've tested that already with Kashpur in India, isn't it, Valentin? And that worked really well. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so we had a $3 million, that was the proof of concept, a $3 million loan coming from Akti to Kashpur, that's an Indian MFI. They deal exclusively with below the poverty line women. That's the only clientele they have. And it resulted in 35,000 sanitation systems being built. And the loan itself is 100% commercial. And what we did is this incentive, we sort of added it to the basket. So if they would achieve the 35,000, they would get a 1% interest rate, which translates to about $60,000. That's the total amount they would get. And then, life is always funny. We have not found a route to transfer that money to India. So it's still in our bank account. They are entitled to it, but getting money out of countries is sometimes difficult. Sometimes also difficult to get money into countries. So this is a very interesting situation. We'll solve it, no doubt. But this is taking more time than anticipated. And that's when we did the proof of concept. We started to learning about these things, and that's really helping us, helping the investors to start this thing. But the whole model is not run on subsidies. This is only a result based and it's paid externally. So even without that incentive, it will function. Because most of the money, I think Josine already talked about it, is, or Pamela, I'm not even sure, one of the two talked about it, is that most of the money is local. So even with the sanitation water impact fund, $250 million is not that. Of course, I don't have it, it's a lot of money, but it's also nothing if you look at the needs and the market sizes.
Maybe in addition, it's really to develop the markets. So the idea is to really kickstart it, and for the financial institutions that will be targeted under that, funds. Initially, I think it's anticipated to have like 40 financial institutions that will receive liquidity out of the fund. It's really for them to embrace that asset class and to understand the risk involved. And it will also require a little bit of cost on their part because they need to develop products, they need to adjust their MIS system. So we're asking something of them. So in return, if they actually build up that portfolio, then at the very end, on an annual basis, they'll get that 1% discount.
But they're already, what's interesting here is I've seen this mechanism used to try to get FIs, local FIs, interested in a new area. But what Pam was saying is that they're already lending to this area.
Some of them are indeed,
Some are.
so some that we already know of already indeed are, having like small portfolios or are acquainted with it already. But of course, if you compare the Kenyan markets to the Ethiopian market or others, there's big differences, of course. And also we want them to get that on the same level.
So you want to establish this as a normal product in these FIs, so they're used to lending for it, they know how to do it, they know what to ask, and they're comfortable with it. And hopefully this seeds the market enough that when you pull out, they keep doing it.
Exactly.
Thank you, indeed.
Good summary, Louis.
I just thought that maybe one question that we could be asking ourselves is that from where we are seated, we're interested in FIs getting into this space. But from their side, why will they get into WASH? Yeah. And I'm looking at a country like Kenya, there are issues to do with principles of responsible investing, things like sustainability financing. So these are market dynamics that are also pushing them towards contributing to the SDGs. And when they finance, let's say, water and sanitation, maybe agriculture, they're already contributing to the SDGs. And that's a space that we are seeing financial institutions in Kenya moving into, and even the other countries at a faster rate than even what our push is. So for us, when we come in with WASH, it's like we're giving them a soft landing into for them to achieve what is already something that they're considering within their mandate.
Related to that, maybe.
I'm sorry, because I'm here to moderate and I need to also look at time. And we have been given a very tight time slot. So I'm going to welcome you to go to them and have the questions and ask them the questions because we are going to be around. And I also want to say thank you for participating. And there's a lot of innovation going on in our project, that's for sure. You already heard, so please come to us when you want to know more. We are looking for more partnerships. We are also looking for those people who can help us getting more impact, getting more results. So we're looking for the co-investors in our project. So please feel free to reach out to us. And for now, thank you for your time and please come on.
Open line.
Well, actually. People worrying a lot more about it. So I wasn't. But one of the challenges is what you're getting credits, but getting it, you're not making sure the stoves are actually used. You shouldn't get a credit if the stove is used because you're not actually generating the benefit. Well, that can actually make sure if you're only getting paid at some point, that's actually a really good incentive.
And those
The market to make sure that there's after sales service. And so it's actually a good incentive. Yeah, no, you only get paid, we leaving alone last year, we made a little bit. So it's going to be practices and yet selling into PRC. And we are only getting repaid from revenue. So if those stoves don't get used, now we structured it so that there is we share that upside with the stove manufacturer because we don't control it. I mean, we're just an investor, we can't control it, but if they have a decide for making sure their stoves are used, and they're just provide service, you see it's fine. So, that occasionally claims to be used for
Yeah, so it's.
so I need to ask you a question. When I was in physical loss this time to go after that IRC was